Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. Now, if you have not picked up on it, this season is all about how do we continue to move this DEI work and effort forward, even when it's being attacked, right? Even if the CEO or Chief Diversity Officer, goes away, or someone else in the organization that has been really driving these efforts for the last few years disappears. How do we continue to do this work forward? How do the leaders in our organizations kind of pick up the pieces and pick up the mantle and continue to drive in the right direction? And so we're going to continue that conversation today with my guest, Toby Mildon. Toby is a consultant in this space, and I'm just really, really excited to have this conversation because I think that you are going to be able to walk away with a few nuggets, as I always say, a few nuggets that will be very helpful to you. So welcome, Toby.
Hey, Sacha. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. So for anyone that may not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I run my own diversity and inclusion consultancy now. I've worked with over 100 clients. I mainly focus on helping them create their diversity and inclusion strategies. And then we also create bespoke programs around, for example, inclusive leadership development. Before setting up my own company, I was a diversity and inclusion manager within the BBC and also Deloitte, the global accountancy firm. But I actually started my career in technology and not diversity. I pivoted my career when I was working at the BBC from from technology to diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had folks on this show that have either started in higher education, marketing and communications, or technology. So you're in good company, and I've had all of those careers. So thank you. So, you spoke about some of the bespoke programs that you do around inclusive leadership. Why are these things coming up right now as being critical to the business?
I think when it comes to inclusive leadership, there's an understanding that organizations want to change the culture of their organization, that if they don't have an equitable or inclusive culture, then they are having a harder time attracting and recruiting talent into the
Mm,
organization, particularly with like younger generations where they have got a real focus on social justice issues or even around climate change. They are being very selective about where they work. So
yes.
organizations are having to work harder at attracting younger talent. On the flip side to that, they're also having to make sure that they've got this culture of inclusion to retain their talent as well.
Mhm.
There's a lot of choice out there for people, and people want to work with companies that align with their values. And if they are not happy working where they are right now, they will look elsewhere, and that costs the business money.
Absolutely. I was doing a presentation not too long ago where I talked about the great resignation. We're not
Mm,
hearing about it anymore, but it's still happening. People are deciding, you know what, this is not where I want to be. This doesn't align with my values. What I'm seeing is not what the organization is saying. And so there's a disconnect. And I think we're spot on with the generational aspect of that. These younger generations are no holes barred. They are coming in and saying, nope, I don't like it. That's not what you said. And finding other work in other places and not
mm,
feeling that they have to, um, that sense of loyalty that older generations has, it's not there. right?
Mm.
And so it's a very different dynamic. And I'm noticing that this has been this has exploded really in this post-pandemic workplace, right? People
Mm.
have started to reprioritize, and work is no longer a top priority. Like, it allows
Absolutely.
them to do live the lives they want to live, right? It's
Mm.
not their lives, right?
And even if the job isn't the top priority, they want to work in a different way now because there's been a major shift for
Yeah,
a lot of people to be able to work remotely, and have greater flexibility.
yeah, absolutely. Part of that is again, reprioritizing family and time with family, and
Mm.
realizing I don't need to spend 2.5, 3 hours in a commute
Mm.
when I can be spending that time with my family. If I work at home, I can just, close my computer and have
Mm.
that more quality time, and have better quality of life. And so I
Mm.
think that that's so important that leaders have that wherewithal. So I want to ask you, because one of the things that I have been hearing so much is, let's return, this return back to the office, back to work, is also this mindset of pre-pandemic, right? We want
Mm.
everyone to kind of get back into that mindset. And we've talked about, people opting out. But what I am also noticing is leaders are having a hard time adjusting.
Mm.
They are not used to the pushback. They're not used to having these challenges of people showing up as human beings, with all of the things that come with that, in the workplace, right? So how are you supporting them, or what would you suggest to leaders that are in that struggle space?
You see, this is like the $1,000,000 question, and if I knew the answer to this or I had the solution to this, um, I would I'd be on a beach
Right.
retiring. Um, it's a conversation I have a lot with my clients because you're right. There are organizations who are they're mandating people to go back to the office, like the pre-pandemic levels. Um,
Hmm.
I think there's a number of issues in that it doesn't suit everybody. Like some people do want to go back to the office. They feel they for a number of reasons, they just feel maybe they just feel they're more productive in the office. Maybe they
Hmm.
want to have the separation between office life and home life because the boundaries have become really blurred, and they're
Hmm.
finding it difficult to balance work and life because of these blurred boundaries. Some people are just extroverted and they enjoy being in the office. They enjoy being around the kind of the buzz of people and just bumping into people in the kitchen and having a cup of coffee and a chit chat, that kind of thing. And that's totally cool. On the flip side, though, there are individuals that prefer to work from home and to prefer to work remotely. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be that they're just introverted, um, and they find the office environment really draining. It could be that they have a disability or long-term health condition, and commuting to and from work presents barriers.
Hmm.
Or they've got caring or parenting responsibilities, and so it's easier to be at home to manage their kind of caring responsibilities. So there's a whole number of reasons. So I think what I say to my clients is that there's no silver or golden bullet to this. I think you
Hmm.
have to kind of ask individuals what they need in order to thrive. But something that leaders are having to do is they're having to update their leadership operating system. I think I take it really for granted that I wake up in the morning and my iPhone has updated automatically without my knowledge. Um, when it comes to leadership skills, it's not that easy. It
Yeah.
takes a lot more conscious effort, and leaders are having to change the way that they manage teams in a remote or hybrid world, um, to get the best out of their people.
Yeah. I love how you phrase that, because I often say to clients, leaders, there is no I give everyone the same thing and everyone's going to strive, strive because that's just equal, right? That's fair, but
Mm,
not everyone needs the same things. And
yeah.
so I use the analogy of having children. Like your
Mm,
kids don't need the same things from you. One may be very independent and you're getting in their way every time you ask a question, and they just need to know when you're picking them up from the million meetings that they have, right? And the
mm,
other one may need a little bit more guidance. And so you
yep.
have to think about it in the same way, where each individual person needs something very different. And so it may not look or seem fair, but it's equitable. And so
Mm,
I love that reframing of your leadership skills, because what we've historically called fair before probably wasn't fair to many
yeah.
people.
Like to you and me, because we work in this space, like equality and equity, like I think we just get it. Um, it's surprising a lot of leaders don't know the difference between equality and equity. And
Yeah.
actually, lots of leaders, when they do understand it, they feel like, well, surely as I need to be fair, I need to treat everybody the same. And I'm like, yeah, you do need to be fair, but unfortunately, we're living in an unfair society,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, we need to be equitable. We need to understand the individual, meet the individual where they're at, give the individual the resources that they need in order to thrive,
Yes.
and then hopefully one day we'll have this equality, um, and then then we can treat everyone the same. But up until that point, our focus needs to be on equity. And for a lot of my clients, this is a real light bulb moment for them,
Yeah.
and then their diversity and inclusion strategy suddenly becomes focusing on the equity piece first. Um, and that's their starting point.
Yeah. That's why I'm the equity equation, right? Like
It's above
it
your
is
head.
it's right here. But that's what it is. It's, what type of support do we provide, or or barriers do we
Mm,
remove in order for people to be fair and feel as if it's fair and equitable, right? Like, how do we get
yeah,
to this place of equality? And it's through that equity work, which is
yeah.
the ugly, messy, uncomfortable work at times.
And I get it because I've got my personal experience because I've got a physical disability that I was born with. So I've been a wheelchair user all of my life. And for me, I learned the difference between the medical model and the social model of disability, which was the medical model says that there's something wrong with you, you need fixing.
Mm,
Whereas the social model is, well, actually, there's barriers that are created by society, in society, and we need to be eliminating those barriers. So
yeah,
if I can't get into a restaurant with my partner because there's steps, it's not the fact that I've got this underlying condition. It's the fact that there's steps rather than a ramp or an elevator that's the problem. And so
absolutely.
that's been my personal understanding, and that's how I explain it to my clients. And then they're
Yeah,
like, "Oh yeah, suddenly I understand it." There's like all sorts of barriers in the workplace. It could be procedural, it could be the kind of the norms and the culture that we've created. It could be policies that we've written. It could be physical barriers. And
yeah,
then suddenly they're like, okay, we're in the barrier removal business now.
absolutely. And I love that you use that example. I often talk about being, when I talk about privilege, I talk about I am temporarily able-bodied right now. So there's
Mm,
certain things that I don't need to think of. I don't think about. But having worked with people with various disabilities throughout my career, I am very conscious of certain things. And so if they're not at the table, or the literal table, I like to be that one person that's like, okay, if we're doing an event,
mm,
what barriers are we creating, right? Are we just checking the box to say that we have things in place, or are we making it difficult to even get to the event so that everything we've checked off makes sense?
mm,
um
mm,
and I had a conversation with Sherry Byrne-Haber in our first season of the show, and she talked about, a building, an office having, I want to say it was a bathroom stall, right, for wheelchairs with disability.
mhm,
And she's like, okay, she's in a wheelchair. She was using that. she went to go use that, and they were using it for storage.
Yeah. It
And I'm like,
happens
what?
all over the world.
Like, what? And she was just like, so they checked the box to say they had it, but it wasn't
Yeah.
accessible. And
Yeah, it
so,
happens all the time. Yeah.
oh my
I
goodness.
I go to a pub and, of course, I'm in the UK, so we've got pubs everywhere.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you go to the pub and you're like, "Oh, I'm desperate for the toilet," and you open the door, and then you realize it's where they're keeping all their cleaning equipment.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And things like that. I think now, again, being in this space, I'm much more conscious of, and I speak up. And so
Mm,
I think at first people are thinking like, well, why is she speaking up? That's that's the actional part of allyship, right? Like that's,
mm,
and so it's also about modeling the behavior. So when I talk to leaders about being inclusive leaders, it's not just checking the boxes, but it's like, what are you actionably doing as well to remove barriers, right?
yeah,
So that that person doesn't always have to feel they have to advocate for themselves.
mm,
And even in organizations, right? If you are saying, okay, we are accessible to everyone, what are you doing to make sure that that is actually true beyond the check boxes, right?
true.
So I want to talk to you about, you say you have 7 best practices for building this inclusive workplace. So, talk to me about those best practices, because I think that there are so many leaders now that are in this phase of, I know I need to do it, I just don't know what to do. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you about that.
Yeah, so these 7 best practices are, detailed in my book, Inclusive Growth, and the reason why I wrote them down was that I I was working in-house, at the BBC in Deloitte, as I mentioned at the beginning,
Hmm.
and, I had a great network of EDI practitioners that I used to work with and meet regularly, and I noticed that there were the same frustrations coming up time and time again,
Mm,
and it got me thinking about, so what does good look like? Okay, these are the frustrations, or this is what's stressing people out. This is what's causing burnout, because we know there's a high degree of burnout amongst
yes.
EDI practitioners and chief diversity officers.
Yes.
But like when organizations get it right, like what are they doing? And I wanted to codify that somehow.
Mm,
And I decided to write a book about it. And I came up with these 7 um, key best practices. They all begin with C, um, and that was just me being pedantic. Um,
that's okay. That's how you
it
remember
just
things.
doesn't. I didn't come up with a fancy acronym or anything like that. It was just like, um, and so yeah. So the first one is called clarity, and that's
Okay.
really about understanding the business case, particularly your unique business case to your organization, not what not what the McKinsey reports are telling you, but like
Mm,
what it actually means to you, your business, and the success and growth of your business. The second C is culture, and
mm,
that's about understanding the role that leaders play in creating an inclusive culture in the organization.
mhm,
The third C stands for change, and that's all about implementing a proper kind of change management process. Don't just kind of wing it. Don't try and boil the ocean and like burn your people out and therefore not make the impact that you want to make. Um, the next C is called colleague experience and design. And I pinched a load of concepts from when I worked in user experience and design at the BBC,
mhm,
because I thought we could apply this human centric thinking or this kind of human centered design within the diversity and inclusion space.
mhm,
Then we go on to cyber, which is about a utilizing technology to help us implement EDI initiatives. But it's also about making sure that any technology that we do use, whether that's internally facing or customer facing, is accessible. And then the last 2 is collaboration. So it's about working as a whole organization, not just the HR department taking responsibility for
mhm,
EDI. And then finally, it's celebration at the end, which I deliberately put at the end because loads of organizations do the celebrating first, which I call window dressing. And they say, "Oh, look, we've changed our logo to the LGBT colors this month because we're such a LGBT friendly organization." But the reality for LGBT staff is that it's not particularly inclusive for them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do all of the hard work first, and then you can do the celebrating at the end, which is about how you communicate to the world that you really are genuinely and authentically an inclusive place to work, but also how you can craft that inclusive employee value proposition or EVP so that you can attract talent.
I absolutely love this.
Thanks.
And it's interesting because I've been working in this space for a while, and I've seen, several processes, and there are a couple that stood out to me immediately. Having clarity first, because to your point, I think people are like, "Oh, yay, we're going to do this." They'll celebrate. They don't know what they're celebrating. They don't have a plan. They're not quite sure what they're trying to do. They don't even have a clear definition of diversity, equity, or inclusion, right? Like they're just kind of, like you said, winging it. So I appreciate, starting there. Culture and then change. Culture, and anyone that has listened or watched or know me, I always talk about culture is what people experience every single day. It is not what is on the cafeteria wall. Like that's aspirational. That's fun. That's some paint. That is not what people experience every single day. And so when you have a better sense of what your culture is, and then what you want it to be, whatever, that aspirational goal is, now you can fill in the gap. So now you're starting, again, that's that clarity and that's planning. Okay, what is it that people are experiencing that we need to change, that we need to shift? What behaviors need to change? What behaviors need to shift?
I've got a funny story about that.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, how do we hold people accountable too? That's a part of it. I want to hear the story.
No, it just reminded me when you were saying about the behaviors written up on the wall. So I went along to do some training for an organization, and I arrived in the reception area, and behind the reception desk was a list of their values, and diversity and inclusion was right at the top of the list. And I thought, oh, brilliant, we're off to a great start here. Diversity and inclusion is like their number one value. So I get in the training room and I start the training, and everyone's, I don't know if you've ever had this kind of situation, but like everyone was sat there, their arms were folded, they had their heads down, they looked miserable and grumpy. And I started doing the training, and I was kind of getting into my groove, and I just wasn't getting like the engagement. Everyone didn't, basically nobody wanted to be there. And I stopped and I said, what is going on here? Like, it looks like, I don't know, this isn't exactly how I said it, but it was like, does anybody actually want to be here? And they were like,
Right.
well, we just don't see the point. Like, like the senior leadership team just don't give two shits about diversity and inclusion. Like, they, they're kind of, their behaviors are not inclusive. So we just don't see the point of being in this training course. And I was like, and then the penny dropped, because I was like, hang on a minute, but it says on the wall behind the reception desk that you highly value diversity, and you want an inclusive work environment where everybody can thrive. And so it just goes to show that you can have those stated values, but people need to walk the talk. And it starts with your senior leaders, because they set the tone for the rest of the organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and that ties into colleague experience, right? Like that is, it's that everyday interaction. And if you're seeing that senior leadership is doing things that are counter to what's on the wall, that's the culture. So if they don't care, why should I care?
Exactly.
Right. And then that means that I can treat you however I want to treat you because I don't value diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. So it's the other part of that, and something that I'm doing a lot more work in is, you said it, it's the human experience.
Mm.
It is forgetting we have gotten to a place where we forget that we are humans and that we have feelings and that we have experiences and that they're not all the same. And so, and it's okay that it's not all the same.
Mm.
And so having those types of conversations, I think, are so important. Um, and part of what I've seen come out of this pandemic, one of the bad things is if I don't agree with you, then I'm going to cancel you. Like I don't even want to hear
Mm.
or pay attention or listen to you. And I think
Yeah.
that that is so damaging to the
Oh,
human experience.
it
So I
is, and
appreciate, yeah,
it's a real fear factor for senior leaders,
yeah,
um, because they're really worried about this, the cancel culture, and
hmm,
therefore, rather than being brave, having difficult, awkward, bold conversations, rather than being vulnerable as leaders, they're backing
hmm,
off and shying away from the conversations that we should be having, and it's damaging for everybody.
yeah, yeah. And then we don't extend grace,
Mm.
right? And that's part of
Mm.
that human experience is, not everyone is perfect. And so people make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. And so
Yeah,
if we extend more grace and understand, okay, that was a mistake. Now you can't keep making the same mistake over and over
yeah.
again and not learning from it. But
Mm.
there's that give and take of that human experience that I think is so important.
Mm.
And that collaboration. That's part of the reason why I do this show, because it is about connecting and being able to build that community of how can we work together? How can we continue to expand this work in different ways? So I love this model. Um, well, everyone that's listening, watching, definitely go out and get this book, because I think that it will be one that gives you a guide, right? It kind of helps you along in this process.
Mm.
So, Toby, I want to do a little bit of a pivot and ask you, this work is difficult. You are out there doing this. How do you take care of yourself? What are the things that you do to fill your cup?
That is a good question because I am not terribly good at it. um, and it's something I need to work on or am actively working on. Um,
Mm,
so for me, I think I'm as like obviously because I run my own consultancy company now, so it's different to when I was working in-house in a business,
mhm,
in a company. Um, but I'm working on my own leadership skills.
mm,
I'm trying to get better at delegating so
mhm,
that I am doing less myself. Um, and so that's one factor. Another factor is just trying to turn off in the evenings, so not
yeah,
checking my emails in the evenings, um, so that I can spend time, quality time with my partner over dinner and not get distracted. But I don't know. I think this is one of the things when you're running your own business that you're constantly thinking about the
yeah.
business, even when you're not working. I find it really difficult to switch off.
It really is. It is, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not the only one.
No. No.
Because I
um,
do it too. I do. But I was telling someone the other day, sometimes I have my best ideas when I have insomnia and it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this makes perfect sense. And so I have to have like a notebook or something near the bed so I can get it out.
Yeah.
So then I'm like not ruminating on it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, one
Yeah.
thing I'm doing this year is every 6 weeks I've got an empty week in my calendar. So I
Ooh.
don't accept any meetings that week at all. I may work during that week, but if I do, it's stuff that I want to work on. It's like
Mm.
focus time or deep work, if you want to call it that. Um, or I might just take a couple of days off or a few days off and do something, either travel somewhere or just potter around the city at home and just do things locally. But it's a kind of every 6 weeks time in my diary is blocked out.
I love that idea.
I'd recommend it. It helps.
Like I'm looking at my calendar now, like wait, go ahead and
You're
do
like
that.
ringing up your PA, cancel all my meetings next week.
Yes, yes, block it, block it. Oh, wonderful. I love that. I love that. So, Toby, if folks wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Two ways. Either LinkedIn, just connect with me and drop me a message. We can have a chat online, or through my website. Got lots of information on my website. I've got my own podcast. I've got my own book. You can get it all in on the website.
Wonderful. Toby, thank you so much for being the guest of the week. I absolutely love this conversation. There's just so much more that we could talk about. But I'm loving these 7 C's and just getting people thinking about, okay, this is how I really need to think about creating this inclusive organization. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me along.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us for this week's episode of DEI After 5. As always, you can like, share, subscribe, do all of the things. We are here every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern with new episodes on YouTube or wherever you find your podcast. And until next time, have a good one.